section of the agenda, please raise your hand function on Zoom. A recording of this meeting will be available on the CJCC website after each meeting. The recording of the March 16th meeting can be found on the CJCC Hub and the Douglas County website. Our first agenda item is regarding the data dashboards with Sheriff J. Armbrister and Dr. Matt Cravens from the CJCC Data Analyst. Matt and Jay, if you want to take the agenda.
Sure, if we're ready, I'm ready to get this thing started. So first off, I just want to say that Dr. Cravens and Mike Brower have done a fantastic job here, and they're kind of letting me kick the ball across the end line here when really they've done most of the heavy lifting. But to give credit where credit's due is actually this kind of began out of a comment made by District Attorney Valdez during her campaign, in that Hennepin County had a really good data dashboard. And it turned out that Dr. Cravens actually went to grad school with the guy who created that. So he reached out, they put their heads together, and he's created this data dashboard using the Sheriff's Office information. And we want to just kind of show everybody what it is. It's going to create probably some questions today, but I know as people begin to look deeper into it and digest it a little bit deeper, there will be a lot more questions coming up. So I know Mike we'll talk about it later, but he's carved out some time for the next CJCC meeting in May to return to this and answer any questions that anybody comes up with. We'll kind of go through it step by step a little bit, and Dr. Cravens will show you the dashboard itself and its capabilities. But from a Sheriff's Office standpoint, we had to kind of sit down and look through all of the information and see what we could and could not put out, for our CJIS, case CJIS requirements, and to make sure that everything was anonymized and aggregate and all that. We will, at some point, we are working on it currently. This dashboard will have a function to download the information into a PDF, an Excel sheet. And what we're still working on, when you download that information, it throws it all into a beautiful spreadsheet, but we have to go back and make sure that it is anonymized to the point where somebody can't take the information, cross-reference it over to some other systems or some other downloaded information, and actually identify the person whose information is being shown. So we're still working on that. I know that, and that'll be a good question that somebody. But so for right now, we have the dashboard to show you. So I'll just kind of turn it over to Dr. Cravens and let him take it from here.
You're muted, Matt. There you go.
Oh, thank you, Sheriff Armbrister. I'm going to share my screen. So I hope everyone can see this. This is the Douglas County Sheriff's Office website, and there's a link to the dashboard on this website. If you scroll through the sliders, you can eventually get to this one right here, and then you could just click on the link and it'll take you to our dashboard. So we've constructed this dashboard with data on bookings and offenses for people entering the Douglas County Correctional Facility. I just want to say thanks to Bryce Hirschman and the Douglas County GIS team for getting this effort off the ground, and for getting me familiar with the ArcGIS software. Bryce is an excellent resource, and he's actually available today to answer any questions if you have them. So I'll say that a lot of this data is actually available in the booking recap report on the Sheriff's Office webpage, but it's just for individual people booked into the facility on certain days. And what's unique about this dashboard is that it aggregates all the data from many years, presents tabulations and figures on it. And as Sheriff Armbrister said, eventually it'll present the data for download in a clean, user-friendly format. And right now we plan to refresh the dashboard every 2 weeks. We can make it every week if people request it at some point, but for now we're going to stick to every 2 weeks. And what we say is that this dashboard can be thought of as a tool for transparency. It shows what's in the Spillman Jail Management System, which is the Sheriff's Office data. There aren't any sort of regression adjusted numbers or anything complicated. The figures are descriptive with tabulations and some averages, and it comes with very little translation from the database. One nice feature of this dashboard is that it can be expanded and changed easily. So if there are additional figures or data we want to add, we can do that. For example, we plan to have a data download link, as we mentioned. It'll allow users to crunch the data in different ways than we currently have displayed. Also, we have a prototype dashboard with bond data that we eventually will incorporate into this or another dashboard. And then as the Esri company that sort of owns the software produces more updates to its software, there will be changes. For example, the dashboard doesn't actually view very well on cell phones yet. You can expand some of the figures to make it better, but it's not optimal unless you're using a computer. So the computer is really the best way to sort of access it right now, but this is something they might address in future software versions. With that introduction, let's just jump right in. I'll warn you that I am colorblind, so if the colors aren't optimal, I apologize. I ended up using one of the ArcGIS default color schemes, and I got some outside help from Carrie Britt on colors too, so we can change those if necessary, but right now, hopefully this works. So I'll just start over here in the corner on race and ethnicity. This is for all 2020 bookings. As a default, we show the last full year of data, which is 2020. And what you can do is click on this top right-hand corner to expand it or to collapse it, and I'll do that right now. So what we see here is a pie chart showing the distribution of 2020 bookings. 70% of 2020 bookings were for people who are white, non-Hispanic. 18% were for people who are Black, and so on. You can actually hover over a slice or a bar on a bar chart to see the details about it. So here we see that there's about 2,000 bookings in 2020 that were white, non-Hispanic. And then just to collapse it, you press the right-hand corner again. Let's go to gender. We see
Dr. Cravens, before we move to that, is it okay if I ask questions as we go?
Absolutely, just jump right in if you have questions.
Fantastic. This is Commissioner Portillo. Just on that race question, I noticed that it said white Hispanic and white non-Hispanic. So are folks who are identifying as more than one racial category, where are they categorized and who is doing the categorization? So is it someone self-identifying, or is this categorization done by police, the police who are bringing them in, the sheriff's department, who is doing intake? And how did we decide on white Hispanic as a category? Because that's one we don't typically see.
So Dr. Cravens, I'll address the first part of that. And it's in my notes here to cover this in a minute, in that the data that is within our Spillman system that this stuff is being mined from is only as good as the input. And you've nailed it exactly what we've been talking about, in that we rely heavily, I mean, if not exclusively, on our booking officers. So our booking officers are corrections officers who sometimes have worked for us for a year, sometimes have worked for us for 20 years. And most of the time what they do is they take the information provided by the arresting officer, transfer that over into our jail management system. And I don't want to call it at face value, but they don't question some things, or they don't get specifics. So and we'll talk about this on arrests by agency at times. Sometimes a person will be arrested by, say, the Lawrence Police Department on some sort of a driving offense, and they spend a few days in the Douglas County Jail, and then they have a new warrant show up from another agency or another jurisdiction, and that comes to us, and one of our jail deputies will serve it. Even though they were arrested technically by the Lawrence Police Department, this now shows up as a whole new arrest by a Douglas County Sheriff's Office employee. So we're trying to figure out how best to make sure our data is accurate. But what I'll say is that in the last few years, with our data becoming so important, we've really worked on making sure that our booking officers are inputting it accurately, and also verifying with the people themselves as to how they identify, and making sure that we have a fair and accurate representation. I hope I didn't muddy the waters there.
And I'll also add that there was one decision made about how to categorize people of Hispanic ethnicity. And what I did is I did make that coding decision to group people into the white Hispanic and white non-Hispanic category. And then if people identified as Black and Hispanic, I left them as Black, or if they identified as Native American and Hispanic, I left them as Native American. So that was a coding decision, and that's something that we can separate out and do that breakout separately. It would be quite easy actually to make another tab that lists Hispanic ethnicity separately from race. I just thought it would be useful, since most people who identify as Hispanic also identify as white, to do that breakdown in particular. But that's something we can certainly change for the next version if you would like.
This is Commissioner Portillo again. I think that it would be helpful to have the Hispanic Latinx ethnicity separate in its own category, because there are quite a few folks who identify as white, but there's also quite a mix of folks who identify in a variety of ways that don't necessarily map onto the same racial categories of Black, Native American, and white, because there's quite a mix of mestizo culture and how we think through a variety of racial characterizations. So I think if we separated that as a ethnicity, but kept it kind of as a separate category, that might be helpful in how folks approach the data, and it'd be a bit more consistent with how other jurisdictions are doing this.
I would agree. This is Maria Ferredo. I would agree with what Commissioner Portillo said and add that Latinx is sometimes a little bit more encompassing. We think of South American countries that don't speak Spanish, so they would not fall under the Hispanic category. That specifically refers to Spanish speaking origin, and not, again, it's that question of ethnicity versus race, where we have a biracial group of people who have been categorized as Hispanic, but may not necessarily identify that way because it does not fit their language nor nationality. And so I think I agree in that I do see issue, because I don't identify as white Hispanic or white non-Hispanic. So I would be confused as to where that population would be held, especially since that is a really important population to have represented in this graph.
That's great feedback, and we can certainly make that change. Thank you very much.
This is Shay Downing, and I wanted to chime in just for a second, because I think at one point we had talked about that and needing to know, not that what they're saying isn't completely accurate, I'm not saying that, but if officers are identifying individuals by a certain race or ethnicity, and if we're trying to figure out if that is leading to issues, how would we be able to differentiate between that information? So I guess what I'm asking is, what is the question we're trying to answer, or we would be looking at this graph to answer?
So this is Mike Brower. I can follow up on that question, Shay. For the purposes of the law enforcement context study with Northeastern University, we are utilizing the officer's identification. For the purpose of these data sets, unless the person is incapable of providing the information to the booking officer, we are using the person's self-report.
Okay, so I think then my question is, so that identification, that's the green slice, is self-identified as white, Hispanic? And I think the question, at least as I'm hearing it, is, are they given another option?
I think if we're asking about the booking process itself, I believe the only time that they're, I don't want to say given an option, is that if there's a question as to, and they'll just ask, you know, what is your race, ethnicity? How do you identify? But I would, I don't want to pin us down on a fact here. I don't know this for a fact, but my guess is that almost exclusively we just use whatever information is presented to us from the arresting agency.
And Matt, am I correct that these are the options that are available in the database?
There's a race option and an ethnicity option separately that are available in the database, yes.
Yeah, and we don't have the ability to add additional options from what the database provides us.
And I also need to, I feel like a little background in that when you make an arrest, we fill out what we used to call a KSAR, Kansas Standard Arrest Report. And the questions when it gets to height, weight, hair, eyes, sex and gender, and then ethnicity and race, the question is what is your race, and then what is your ethnicity? And the only two options are white Hispanic or non-Hispanic, Hispanic or non-Hispanic. So it's broken down on the Kansas arrest report as Hispanic or non-Hispanic. So somebody can identify as white and Hispanic, Black and Hispanic, Pacific Islander and Hispanic. Those are, but it's not, you can't break it out. We don't aggregate it any farther than that on the arrest report. So for me personally, if I was arrested, it would show up as a white NH non-Hispanic male. And so that's the information that the booking officers are presented from the arresting officer. So therefore, I think that's probably why there's maybe a limited scope as to what shows up here.
This is Commissioner Portillo. That's a pretty standard way for a lot of those questionnaires to work. But what typically happens then is anyone who says yes to the Hispanic question gets pulled out and reported separately, and then no gets pulled out and reported separately in racial categories, which is very complicated because there are a multitude of races within the Latinx category. And so we may still say that we want to pull out Black and Native American Latinx folks and include those in those spaces, or we might want to have a multi-ethnic, multiracial category. I think that those are both really valid options, but pulling that ethnicity question separate from the racial question, I think is still a way to go.
And I don't disagree, but that would have to be something, if I'm wrapping my head around it correctly, that would be something we would have to do as at a Douglas County jail level, because the state requires this arrest report and it only asks race and Hispanic or non-Hispanic ethnicity. So that would require, once they come to our facility and it says Hispanic or non-Hispanic, we would need to ask a follow-up question as to where we go from there. So if that's something that we want to do, that would be something that we would need to integrate into our booking protocol, basically, if you will. But I would also have to say that we wouldn't be able to go backwards into our data and change it over. We would have to start, with that data set from that point.
Well, it sounds like we have both questions represented in the data set. So I think this isn't asking an additional question. It's just sharing the data that we have differently. So instead of collapsing the race and ethnicity questions into a single presentation, we would keep ethnicity separate. Okay,
and maybe I'm just not understanding. Maybe I'm looking at it from the booking/arrest report and not from the data situation. So I apologize if I am muddying the water.
Yeah, just to keep us moving, because we've spent a lot of time on one topic and we've got about 100 more to go. But can I refer to Major Bunting or to Matt? We could make this two graphs, correct? We could make this a race graph, and then we can make an ethnicity graph.
Absolutely,
based
yeah.
on our database.
Right.
And that would get us there, correct? Where we want to be.
Great. All right. Moving along to gender, we have 72% of 2020 bookings were male and 28% were female. Moving over to length of stay, what I did here is break out all the data into different years and had one tab for all years of data. So this dashboard covers 2017 up through 2021 data. It was last updated on 4/7/2021. So all the releases, all the people released up until then. So this is booking data collected at the point of release. And so here what we see is all bookings across 7 length of stay categories. About half of bookings stay either 0 to 3 hours or 3 to 24 hours. Another 3,582 bookings stayed 1 to 3 days. And then you can see the distribution here for the remainder of bookings for the the all years of data. If you pull out 2017, you can see that the distribution is slightly different, but generally about the same. 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021 so far. So another way of showing length of stay is to show the average length of stay by year. And this is what this figure is doing. It's sort of a nice summary figure to compare different categories or different years. What we see is that the average length of stay has increased somewhat over the years. There's not a lot of data for 2021 yet. So, don't take that, as a too definitive of a statement yet. As more data is collected, that may move around a little bit, but we see that it's a little lower in 2021 so far. We also did the figure for race. What we see here is that the average length of stay is higher for the Black category than it is for the white, non-Hispanic, and white, Hispanic, and Native American category. The Asian average length of stay in 2020 was a lot lower.
This is Pam. So will that be separated into ethnicity as well?
Yeah, so this uses the same race ethnicity category that I used in the pie chart before. And we, I'll have to think about how to display it if we're doing race and ethnicity separately. Maybe I could do two separate average length of stay figures, one differentiated by race and one differentiated by ethnicity. That may be the way to go. But as of now, I use the same race ethnicity categories as the pie chart.
Matt, this is Patrick Schmitz, Burt Nash. Can you do that graph by year, by race, by ethnicity? So we track and trend if there's any differences by that grouping?
Yeah, it is possible to do that. I mean, we were thinking that with the data download option, that would give people a really handy way of sort of doing that themselves, but I can also do that on the dashboard. It would just take a little bit more sort of real estate, which is fine with me. I don't mind doing that if people want. Like, for instance, I can just add a tab here that says ALOS, which is average length of stay by race ethnicity for 2021 and other years. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, I just want, that's what I was thinking, yes.
Matt, can that be broken down by offense? Because I think offense is going to be the major thing of driving, and if it's not, then there's a real disparity. But we should be looking probably at what offenses and how long someone stays on a certain type of offense.
Yeah, that would be possible. There's just so many offense categories. For instance, we list about 15 different offense categories, and then you can also break it down by whether or not it's a felony or a misdemeanor, or by if it's a district court offense or a municipal. I mean, there's sort of an infinite numbers of ways of breaking it down, and we kind of thought we would just start with the sort of high level statistics, but that's something we could think about incorporating. So I'll sort of take that.
Matt, this is Mike. You did that last June, correct? In the
Right,
presentation you provided to the
right.
CJCC. So if you go back to the June CJCC meeting, and you can watch Matt's presentation on that and download the PowerPoint slides specific to that.
And Darren, did you have a question too?
I actually did, and I apologize. It's actually going to be us backtracking a little bit. I just have some questions about the gender slide, the gender report. Is male and female what's given to us again from the KSAR in terms of where that information is drawn from? And just to be clear why I'm asking, language does matter. I mean, male and female is biological sex versus gender, and it's also binary. So it's where, back to Marielle's point, there's a potential of missing the way a significant portion of the population identifies as well. So just kind of trying to figure out where those labels are coming from and where the information is coming from, because it is leaving out.
No, it's a great question, Darren. And you're absolutely right in that the KSAR only gives you two options. And so it is a yes or no question. But to get off further into the weeds, but to also address your question in that the Douglas County Jail takes it a step further, and we see how they identify. And we have trans folks who identify one way. We even have folks who are actually in the process of transitioning through the surgical and chemical therapies and stuff. And we continue that while they're with us, but we work with them individually to make sure that they are housed in a way that respects them, but also gives them it follows their will, and we don't shove them into a certain category. So yes, we're limited on the data simply because the state only allows you to pick one or the other. And I think we can all talk long and hard about what the state thinks is right and wrong. But just to expand it a little further, is that the Douglas County Jail takes it much, much further, and it's much more individual driven. So
I think there's a case to be made if there's a way that the kickouts of reports can note that actually at the county level, that's actually being considered.
Well, Darren, this is Mike Brower. That's a limitation of our database as well. The Spillman database gives us two options, male or female. And we got taken to task about this in 2015 by KU and 2017 by the Justice Center. And, we're just simply at the mercy of our box system. That the sheriff's office has contacted them and asked them to make those changes. But we're at their mercy on that end. Although Sheriff Armbrister is right, functionally, the sheriff's office addresses a person as they identify.
Yeah, and I think all I'm arguing for is, I hear that absolutely. Is there a way to reflect that reality is there, like in a note on the dashboard itself? Not really.
Now, I think again, it goes back to it would just create one more step that we would have to do as a Douglas County Jail, not something not information we would get from an arresting officer. So the short answer is yes, it can be done. It's just a matter of figuring out the best way to do it. And then also, again, moving forward, our numbers would be more accurate as opposed to going backwards. We couldn't go back and figure any of that out.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I think part of what Darren is asking is not necessarily to update the numbers, but to just, like, off to the left on this dashboard, we have source and notes, and maybe just in the notes section, note that our jail does take into account non-binary representation. Well, we actually take into account how folks self-identify gender-wise, and we have non-binary folks and trans folks in our jail.
Right.
And those are not reflected in the numbers. So just a note, not updating the data, just a note.
That's information we want out. We want to show that, we want other jails and agencies to hopefully learn from us and how they do it. But also, if we're making mistakes, we want to know that as well. So yes, thank you. Great questions.
That's all I'm saying. Thank you, Commissioner.
Great. So over here to the top right-hand corner, we have offense type, and I'll expand this. This is data for all 2017 to 2021 bookings. And as you can see, the most common offense by far is failure to appear. I'll note that there's also an other municipal county violation category right here that booking officers select if they don't know the specific offense information. So the numbers you see for other categories like DUI, for instance, could be a little lower or a little higher, depending on how many of those particular offenses like DUIs are actually put into the other violation category. One thing nice I'll say though is that since we've brought this to the attention of officers, they've been using the other category less often. So if we flip over to 2021, we'll see that other municipal county violation is very small. There's only been 15 of them entered. So that's a nice sort of data cleaning that's been happening. Note that the figures that mention offenses are on the offense level. So each observation is an offense, but one booking can have multiple offenses. Spillman doesn't identify the most serious offense that people have at booking. So basically, if someone has a probation violation and a drug offense, they'll sort of show up in this data twice, essentially. So just keep in mind that people can have multiple offenses per booking. Any questions about this figure here?
What does the, oh, this is Maria Ferreira. What does the not listed elsewhere category represent?
Yeah, so what we did is we broke out all offenses into, let's see, I think this is about 15 to 20 different categories, but there are a small number of other offenses that are smaller than about 250 observations that we just put into a not listed elsewhere category. So for instance, like murder, for instance, is not on here because there's so few murders that we didn't want to break that out into its own category because there would just be a few. So that murders go into not listed elsewhere. And so that's what that is basically. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And on the
Matt,
flip
this is
side,
Pam.
oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
On the flip side of that too, there are some horribly obscure offenses that somebody can be arrested for. Like in the Douglas County, you can actually be arrested for failure to eradicate a noxious weed. If you have those purple thistles, you know, that's a misdemeanor that you technically could be arrested for. We would obviously never do that, but there are cases where somebody's arrested for something that is just something we don't see very often. So that could be in there as well.
Matt, this is Pam. I think this would be a good place for another explanation, like Darren described for gender, where we talk about what not listed elsewhere means for folks who are looking at it.
Yeah, I'm writing that down. That's a great point.
Thank you.
I can just add that to the notes on the left-hand column. And what's nice about separating it by different years is you can see that the rankings have changed a fair amount. So, I mean, a lot of times, you know, failure to appear is usually first and DUI is second or third, but it changes a little bit by year. Over down here, we have offense classification. And again, everything that mentions offenses is at the offense level. And what we see is that in 2020, there were 897 felonies, there were 3,393 misdemeanors, and then there were 1,200 people who listed as unknown NA. And then unfortunately, we can't do anything about the unknown NAs. Sometimes that's like remand or probation violation will fall under this category a lot of times, but there are a fair number of those. Over here,
Matt,
yes.
this is Mike. Can I mention on those that those are not individual arrests? People are average. I believe the Justice Center, when they did their data dive for 2017-18, the average number of offenses per arrest was 2.5. So you could have one felony, 2 misdemeanors, or one in each category. So that's not individual arrests.
Matt, this is Mariel again. I hate to make more work for you, but that would also be something interesting to, I'm just thinking of like if community members look at this, they would be shocked by that number, but hearing what Mike said would be like, oh, okay, there's could be multiple offenses. So maybe that note would be helpful also just to state something that may be obvious to some, but maybe not to everyone.
As a fellow community member, I just want to thumbs up what Mariel just said, for whatever that's worth.
Great, that's a great suggestion. And you know, at some point it could be worth showing like the distribution by category. For instance, if someone has all misdemeanors versus all felonies versus a misdemeanor and a felony, the problem is that just creates a lot of different categories that might be a little bit confusing. But I mean, for now, adding a note is a good option and we can certainly do that. Over here for county residents, we have 70% of bookings are for people who list their address as Douglas County, and 26% who list their address is not Douglas County. There are some people who don't have a zip code listed. Education is also in the booking assessment. What we see here is that 20% of bookings list their education as less than 12 years, 44% listed as 12 years, and 31% listed as more than 12 years. And then we have 5% that are blank. over here on judicial status, and one thing to note too is that you can move the columns around. So it won't change anything permanently, but you can sort of do this and just sort of move the columns around to make things a little bit bigger or smaller. So this is judicial status. This is at the offense level. This is for 2020 offenses, and 55% of offenses were pretrial status. Another 14% were pending referral to a prosecutor. 8% were charged not filed by prosecutor. 11% were sentenced to county time. About 3% were sentenced to state time. Any questions on this?
When we have this, Commissioner Portillo, when we have charged not filed by a prosecutor, what would be one of the reasons that someone would still be held in the jail if there's no charge and they haven't been through a trial? Can you just help me understand that category?
It'd be most likely probably, I mean, the lowest hanging fruit for that would be somebody who has a detainer through another agency. So you're arrested for, say, domestic violence, and you also have a Johnson County warrant. The district attorney will review the case. They will let us know we're declining to charge this case. They can be released. So we release them on the system from that charge, but they still have a Johnson County detainer. So we would contact Johnson County and arrange pickup. That would be the lowest hanging fruit. But I would say that that is actually quite common to have detainers through other agencies in other jurisdictions.
And we also collect the data at release. So someone could just be booked in, stay for an hour, and then leave. And then the judicial status at release here is charged not filed by prosecutor. So they might not be staying.
That's going to occur frequently with DUIs where there's been a blood draw and you're going to wait on test results before you get back. So the prosecutor is going to decline to charge at that time. The person will be released. There can be a variety of cases where the prosecutor may decide we don't have enough information to file right now, so we decline, but then they may be filed later.
A quick question, this is Mariel. So the file's not charged by prosecutors. What I'm thinking of is detainers. Is there, and I don't know if this is a ridiculous request or not, is there a way to see what those potential arrests were for? I'm just thinking of like ICE detainers and things like that, just keeping track of if the county is doing that and what it looks like.
I would obviously refer to the experts in the room when it comes to the data portion of it. But what I do know is that first off, the ICE detainers are just fortunately very rare for us, but we could technically probably mine that data out independently just simply by agency to know how many arrests or that type of thing. But again, that I would let the data folks work on that. I'm just the guy trying to figure out how to be sheriff here. So
yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And, you know, at some point when we have the data download option, you'll be able to sort of select these cases that say like charge not filed by prosecutor and then see what their specific offenses are for that they're booked in for. So that'll be something you can do in the future.
Okay. That's super helpful. Thank you so much.
Now, unfortunately, the chart sort of cuts off some of these categories, but you can hover over them to see what they are. This is the release reason. So for 2020 offenses, 25% were released on their own recognizance. 20% were released with a cash or surety or credit card bond. 16% were released with a charge dismissed or not filed. There's a pretty large other category here. That's about 13%. And then 8% were released with time served. And 5% were released on the judge's authority. 4% were released to Department of Corrections. 4% released to other agency. 3% released to probation or parole, and then 3% released to house arrest. And then the final figure here shows court jurisdiction and case type. So most of the offenses have a district court criminal case associated with them. Then there's some district court traffics. There's district court others, and there's a note about what the other category includes. Other can include offenses that had not been assigned a case number by the time of release, or offenses for which charges had not been filed by the prosecutor by the time of release, or offenses someone posts bond for before first appearance in court. So the other can include a number of sort of situations. Over here we have municipal cases, municipal court traffic, municipal court other, and then there's a number of sort of out of county offenses as well. So that is it for the dashboard. Are there any last questions? There's notes here on the left-hand column that you can see. As again, we say use a computer for optimal viewing, and you can click the top right-hand corner for any figure to expand or collapse it. There's also some notes about sort of, you know, one booking can be associated with multiple offenses, and the year indicates the year of release and other things like that. So Bob, I see a hand up.
Thanks. I have a question about tracking the number of bookings into the jail for people with SMI and then the length of stay. I mean, I know there are some things we're tracking on that, and I realize that's gathered sort of in a different way, but is there, I'm wondering what the frequency is that we're looking at that data. Is that something we're looking at annually, quarterly, and how is that, what's the plan for that to face publicly?
Well, actually, this is Mike. I'll jump in there, Bob. I did not pay Bob money to make a wonderful transition here into the Stepping Up Initiative data dashboard, but we'll do that since they asked the question. So as many of you know, we're one of 33 innovator counties for the Stepping Up Initiative, which is the initiative to reduce the number of people being booked into our jail with mental illness and reduce the length of time that they spend there and improve their outcomes once they're released. So when we completed the project with CSG back in the final presentation was December of 2019. One of the things that they had begun encouraging us to do is try and put together a data dashboard and around our 4 key measures. This led to talk the entire year with multiple innovator counties challenging, you know, could we put these dashboards together and could we set goals for improving our outcomes? So last May, we presented the challenge from Stepping Up, which was to reduce our numbers in 4 key areas. So as I said, you can go back to the May CJCC meeting and there's a PowerPoint presentation and of course a recording from this. But one was to reduce the percentage of people being booked into jail with a mental illness by 10%, to reduce the average length of stay for people with mental illness by 5%, to improve connections to care for people with serious mental illness by 10%, to reduce recidivism, returning to jail by 10%, and then to be able to take frequent snapshots of our jail population and reduce the standing population, people staying in jail as well, and to reduce that by 5%. So Matt, in addition to this, has been working on a data dashboard for Stepping Up Initiative, and I'll have him walk through that and say congratulations, Douglas County. We are the 2nd innovator county to release a data dashboard. Franklin County, Ohio beat us to it, but we won't hold that against them because their criminal justice coordinator's name is Michael as well. So they're good people. But go ahead, Matt, and show the Stepping Up dashboard and answer Bob's questions.
Great. And one thing I'll just note is I did skip one figure on the last dashboard. It just showed the total number of bookings by year, and you'll see that the total number of bookings has declined pretty steadily over the last couple of years, but that's something people can explore on their own time too. So this is the sheriff's website. Again, there's a link to the SMI, the Stepping Up dashboard on this webpage. You can click here to go to it. So over here on the left-hand column, we have a few links that provide some basic background information. This is a link to a video about Douglas County and the Stepping Up Initiative. I'm not going to click on this, but if you do, it has some good information. We have definitions here of serious mental illness, is a diagnosable mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder of sufficient duration to cause serious functional impairment in an individual's major life activities. DCCF is Douglas County Correctional Facility, a definition of how we calculate days in jail. Over here on the top left-hand corner, we have a figure that shows serious mental illness bookings as a percent of total DCCF bookings. So this shows that the percentage of bookings sort of dropped significantly after 2014, but it's been creeping up steadily since then. In the most recent quarter of data, 11% of bookings have been for people with SMI. The target that Mike mentioned for us now is about 8%, so we hope to get this number down. Over here, we have the SMI percent of the DCCF population. This is the average population over 3 months from January to March of 2021. The total population has averaged 124 people. And what this figure shows is that 31% of the standing population has been people with SMI. So the reason this figure is different than the percent of bookings is that people with SMI tend to stay longer in the jail. So they're staying longer, and about 31% of them are SMI. Over here on the right-hand column, we have a figure, I'll expand it, that shows the average days in DCCF for SMI bookings and all bookings. What we see is for SMI bookings, the length of stay is quite a bit higher. It dropped considerably after 2018 and 2019, but it does appear to be creeping up a little bit as of at the end of 2020. What we should say is that the length of stay for the SMI bookings is high in part due to the people who wait a long time in DCCF to be sent to Larned for competency evaluations. But even without the people going to Larned, if we were to break that out, the length of stay for the SMI population would be higher than the non-SMI group. At some point in the future, we plan to break out the people waiting for Larned transfers from the others in the SMI group. So with that, does that answer your question, Bob? Or are there any remaining questions about this dashboard?
No, other than I just make the observation that I think typically the SMI population in a community is less than 10%, and our population in our jails 30. And if you look at the average days in the bookings, it's a pretty significant difference. I think opportunities to drill down a little bit more and see what other opportunities exist, because we've made tremendous progress overall, but at the same time, there's some opportunities I think in here to better understand what's going on for that 30% of our population.
And Shays has her hand up.
I actually had my hand up on the other slides. I was wondering if we could not get the number of offenses and the type of offenses designated by race categories. And also the length of stay for misdemeanors only.
Yeah, can you all see this? I just switched to the other dashboard. Great. So Shay, you're talking about seeing the offense type.
Yes.
By race, and then also the length of stay for just misdemeanors by race.
Correct.
Yeah, that's something we can do. Some of that will be in the presentation that we gave June of last year. Not all of it, I don't think, but some of it could be in that, and also in the subgroup presentations that we've given. I've done some of those breakouts by race. But in terms of the public facing dashboard, we can add some of that. I mean, maybe we should work with you to figure out which of those are the highest priority, and then include those after we figure out which ones are best to include. But certainly that's an option. We can sort of break out the data in a lot of different ways.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for Matt or Jay? Thank you so much, Matt and Jay, for the presentation. This is excellent.
And
Our next
then-
agenda item is a presentation on enhanced diversion with Deputy District Attorney Josh Seiden and Shannon Young, the Adult Services Supervisor for Criminal Justice Services.
Thank you. And so what we'll do here is I've got some slides. I'll share my screen in a second here, but just kind of give you all a little overview what this enhanced diversion program is and the way that we found it functioning. Essentially what it is it's an extension of our regular diversion program, and with enhanced and through the enhancements, it provides some supervision through criminal justice services. It also enables us to get a risk and needs triage assessment or a RANT conducted of applicants to determine what level of supervision they might need. And so as we've been referring people to this program, we found that a lot of people that are applying for diversion they fall in the low risk, low needs category, or we screen their applications and we determine that it's someone who's not really in need of supervision. So then we're looking at ways that this option can function. There have been 3 people that were directly placed into the enhanced diversion program, but what we're looking at doing with it is it's also an option for people that are on diversion that may be struggling and may have trouble complying along the way. So now this gives us another option as opposed to moving for revocation, where in the past and being on the defense side, there were times where I would have clients that I would find that they were eligible for diversion, but then in talking with them, it was a situation where they thought they were going to have a hard time staying up on things and meeting the requirements. And so in going through that and looking what we could do with this program, this is a program that gives us an option to extend the offer of diversion to more people, and it makes it more appealing in that it's not either you succeed on diversion and then the next step if you don't succeed is revocation and then you're on probation or something of that nature. This is essentially another tool that we have to provide alternative options for people. And so what I'll do is I'll share my screen here and we'll go through some materials that we have. So essentially what we have is, we look at what the purpose is of this option. And, we're still looking to obviously to hold people accountable, but an important aspect here is that through supervision, this enables us to help link people with community resources, which, many times taking part in some sort of counseling or some sort of programming is going to be a condition of diversion. And so we were looking at, well, we're telling people that we want them to go out and complete these different tasks. And this gives them a mechanism to help them along the way. Because while you're on diversion, you're generally not going to be represented by counsel. And so this gives you the participants an opportunity to get some help in accessing those resources through the community. And that can be, whether it be related to substance use, whether it be related to mental health, things of that nature. And in diverting people, the intention is that we do this early in the case so that we're increasing judicial efficiency, not having dockets full of people who are ultimately going to be winding up on diversion anyway. We want to get this early because, and also, of course, it's very important that if there are people that are in need of services, we want to do what we can to be linking them with services early on. And this all goes towards the larger goal of reducing the jail population. If there's alternative programming available to people, we want to get them into that as soon as we can. And then from our primary function in this office is public safety. And so if we have people that are amenable to alternative programming, we can then allocate our prosecutorial resources to the more serious cases. So if we have someone that would be suitable for a diversion program, we're not going to be spending a lot of time and resources on those cases. We want to, get them where they're going, get them into the services, and get them on their way moving forward. So then, eligibility, what we do is we look at a number of different factors here. But there's a number of things that we consider on a case-by-case basis that we kind of go through on here. It's kind of what I would refer to as a never say never category. I mean, I would just note that it's going to be very rare that if an offense is committed with a firearm that you would be receiving diversion. But again, we don't want to summarily exclude all of these types of categories because we know that there's case-specific and offender-specific characteristics that we do need to take into account. A huge portion of this is also victim input is something that we seek as we're looking at these matters too, because we want to do what's in the best interest of the community, and we also want to find a way that we don't want to devalue any victims in any of these matters. And so then kind of the way that it operates is lined out here. And so what we will be doing is we'll maintain, from this office, we maintain program oversight. We have our policies and procedures that we've made available. We will look at the cases that we believe are eligible. If it comes to the point of a violation hearing, we will conduct a violation hearing. And then we also are collecting program data so that down the road we can take a look at things and see what the data tells us. Criminal Justice Services, they can flag potential cases at first appearance because the same types of assessment is used for the pretrial release program. We're using the same types of tools here. And then Criminal Justice Services, they create the proposed orders, and then the monitoring orders, and then they monitor the participants that are assigned to the program, and they report compliance. And in a minute here, we'll get to the forms that are used. And then we also have the clinical services. What we work in conjunction with adult services such that if someone needs some type of clinical services, we can help them get into those programs. The evaluations are then received. And then if they're being monitored through Criminal Justice Services, then that department can let our office know if people are staying in compliance, or if someone's having a hard time, they can give us a report on that, and we can have an idea of how people are doing in the program. And then as far as the screenings and assessment, this gets into the risk and needs triage and the monitoring plan. I'll turn it over to Shannon Young because she is the expert on these areas.
Hi, this is Shannon Young with the Adult Services, Criminal Justice Services. Hi, so the DA's office will notify Adult Services of any potential clients who might be eligible for the enhanced diversion. And once our office is notified, then we contact that referral, that client, to complete the RANT, which stands for the Risk and Needs Triage. We complete that assessment, and those assessment results are then used to identify any monitoring risk or clinical needs that person might have. And that just helps us identify, monitoring level or any further services, referrals to any clinical services that person might need. Once we have that assessment done, we provide that information to the district attorney's office. If they approve that person for the enhanced diversion, then we create their individualized monitoring plan. And then we monitor those clients that are assigned to the program. And so by monitoring those clients, it could be they call in or they report into us, but it's the least restrictive monitoring as possible. And so what we do is we help coordinate any referrals to any community-based services that they might need. So if they're assigned to community service work, if they need substance use treatment, we can help facilitate those referrals. We can also help provide any services such as, or any assistance such as bus passes for those clients who lack stable transportation so that they can get to and from work or to and from those treatment services. And we also monitor like the district attorney's office does, we also provide that data into the database so that we can, track program goals, make sure we're meeting those goals, and also help identify any areas that we can improve.
And so this just kind of gives an overview of what our process is at this time. And one thing I'll note is that it's not etched in stone. What was important to us, this is something that Ms. Young and I have been talking about back in probably October. I think we began talking about it because it was a program that I know that the Criminal Justice Services, Adult Services had wanted to get going for a while. And then District Attorney Valdez, when she found out about this program, it was something that she wanted to really be able to hit the ground running on. And so in consultation with each other, we all just thought that the best thing to do would be to get this program rolling as soon as possible. And we can sort of pivot as needed, as needs change within the community and within the population of people that would be appropriate for this program. We wanted to have something available as quickly as possible. And a good thing about this program is that it's not like there's some sort of large upfront cost or anything like that. It's something that we were able to get rolling pretty quickly. First week of February was when we got the first person accepted into the program. And so we're able to have this option available. And something that we're doing to help more quickly identify people for this program is we've expedited the manner in which we review diversion applications in this process and within this office. And then all the diversion applications, they all come directly to me. And so at the time that we receive these applications, there's not a separate application. People don't have to apply specifically for this program. They can just apply for diversion. And if looking at the case, collecting victim impact and statements and things of that nature, we determine that someone would be more appropriate for this program. I then contact Ms. Young and count as well as counsel for the defendant or the defendant themselves if they're unrepresented, and suggest that this is something that they could be considered for. So it's a good option to have. And so something that we do note here is that there is counsel provided for people once they're participating in the program. That's something that Criminal Justice Services is able to make available, which is something that's very valuable for people to have when they're in a program like this. It's similar to how drug court and behavioral health court have attorneys. Attorneys can be provided for this program as well. And so something that I think is really important here is that there's no application fee. There's no program fee. So this program does not discriminate against people who are impoverished or just don't have the means, otherwise have the means to be able to afford this type of a program. So just being in the program is not going to cost somebody money to get in. As far as the assessments and things of that nature, depending on what type of assessment you may need to get in this program, some of those have a statutory rate, and we're not really in a position to do anything about that. They're private providers that charge money for those things. But we hope that what we can do is kind of offset those costs by not charging anything here. If you go to any of the other local jurisdictions, if you go to any of the other counties, go to the district attorney's office or county attorney's office, they all charge for this type of programming, at least an application fee. So that's something that we really wanted to lower the bar and lower that hurdle to let more people through to this program. So we don't want anything that's going to be cost prohibitive. And so then, as Ms. Young had noted, both Criminal Justice Services and the District Attorney's Office, we track the program data so that we acknowledge that right now we're probably not really getting an accurate snapshot of what this program will look like moving forward. I think that once we get out of sort of the the COVID times and return to some kind of normalcy, I think we'll have a better idea of who this program is serving and what this program can do. And so we're looking forward to that. And so as far as questions, it looks like Mr. Kennedy, it looks like you got your hand up there.
Excuse me, I do. Thank you. But I really love to hear that this program is being put together and taking off. I don't think it's a nitpicky question, but it's a ways back. It was on the eligibility slide.
Mhm.
And so I have this question about, I think, and I see here, you've got the grid. A lot of this has a lot of clarity to it, and I love clarity. But there is this question that I have about a need for a genuine sense of remorse. And so I'm wondering, who is that your office that's adjudicating that? Is that is Young that's adjudicating that? And kind of how much weight does that carry in someone being allowed into the program? And to be clear, why I'm asking, remorse, again, some other things have a little bit more clarity or black and whiteness around them. Remorse feels like, according to whom, what behaviors are you looking for? That looks different for different people. So just kind of want to know, how much weight does that carry and how it's being assessed?
No, that's a very good question. And one thing that I'll note is that what we've done with our diversion application that we had revised in January, we've simplified it. There used to be this long portion before District Attorney Valdez took office. There was this long portion where, what did you do? Explain it in detail. Tell us how sorry you are and why you're so sorry, and tell us why you would be good about diversion. And quite frankly, usually someone's attorney is just going to tell them what to write on that. So we have removed that portion. As far as the issue of remorse, I would say that probably applies more in special circumstances. I would say it depends on the nature of the offense. We have had a couple come through where I thought that remorse was important, but it's something that we have to assess on a case-by-case basis. And it depends on the nature of the offense, and it also depends on what the impact on the victim is, if that's a major thing, if that's a major issue in the case. But it would be something that I would take a look at it. I would, when I have questions, usually what I'll do is I'll staff it with one of the other attorneys in the office, or maybe two of the other attorneys, and get some thoughts from them. And since the majority of these cases don't originate with me, I already get some input when the file comes to me. I usually have some input from the victim witness coordinator who's been in contact with any ascertainable victim. And then, the attorney that's been assigned to the case will then give me some thoughts as to what they're thinking about it. So, remorse, I think it's kind of a fluid concept. And this is a very long answer to a kind of a short question that you asked. So sorry for my rambling.
No, that actually, it was a complicated question. It might have been succinctly asked, but it's complex. So I'm glad to hear that also the victim impact statements or the equivalent there are taken in. So thank you. Yes, that gets at what I was wondering.
Sure. And Shay, I don't know if you still have your hand up from last time, or if that's a hand up for a question that you have now. But
No, it was from last time. I don't have any. Thanks.
I didn't want to overlook you. So that what we have here is what I've got the slide now is this is the different levels of supervision, and so it just kind of shows that what we want to do is, while this program is intended to be narrowly tailored to the specific needs of the participant, we don't want to be over supervising someone. We don't want to be under supervising someone. We do want to have some sort of a structure, some sort of a framework for what we're doing here. And the way that the enhanced diversion program works right now is it's not something that exceeds 12 months. And so it can be a shorter term. And then you can just kind of see here how the supervision level correlates with the results of the rant And so it's something that we look at here. And the plans, the personalization that is included in these plans, I think is very important because it's something that Ms. Young will put together. She'll send to me and ask if I have any additional thoughts or recommendations. And so it's something that we do spend some time on here to make sure that we at least try to get off on the right foot in terms of supervising people. And then we also have, here's the response grid, which I'll go through a little bit. It just kind of talks about what some of the sanctions are and what you might have to do if you're going to be sanctioned. So this is something that we feel like is important as well, because it's something where we understand that while we would like 100% compliance every time, it's people are in a difficult spot if they're getting into this program, and we understand that there's going to be some bumps in the road, and we don't want to jump right away to revocation. We don't want to put people in programming just to jam them up the first time that they have some trouble. So this is just kind of runs the gamut of the different types of response there can be, the different types of sanctions. And then here we have the violation report. So it's not just simply like a phone call or something between Ms. Young and I. This is something that's formalized. So if there is a violation, then we see which of these categories it falls under, and what category is it in, and how should we be responding to this. And so there's methodology to that as well.
Josh, this is Commissioner Portillo. Can I jump in with a quick question on this one?
Yes.
You mentioned that this may be between you and Ms. Young. Is there any representation from the defense bar in the conversation around these violations? I recognize it's not necessarily a new legal violation, but since it could have consequences, is that the entire work group that's coming together? Does the bench get involved in any way, or is it just the prosecution and supervision?
Well, that's a good question. And so it would not involve the bench because this is a diversionary program. In this particular program, there's not court interaction unless we go to a revocation hearing. As far as this goes, we have not reached this point yet in any of the cases to where there has been a violation report, but this would be a reason that we would have counsel integrated to the program, would be so that this would be a conversation that the defense would be a part of, because someone may wish to, if they wish to contest their violation, or if they wish to provide some sort of an explanation as to why we may be mistaken, they would have the opportunity to do that as a participant in the program.
Thank you.
Hey, Josh, I had a quick question too. This is Carrie Nice with the Reentry Department. Just thinking to the future, what is the DA's office doing to address kind of the net widening effect that can happen when you bring in these new diversion programs? So should we be seeing like a reduction in probation cases, or people being put on probation? Or how can we ensure that this isn't just going to scoop up more people and end them on supervision? I guess, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would say what we have done is anybody, like a number of the, so you've got of the number of people that we've put in to diversion since getting here in January. I'm looking at it, a lot of a number of the applications that come through, they're people that would have gotten diversion anyway. And so that doesn't really change much for that segment of people. Then we have kind of the people on the higher end that would not have gotten diversion if not for this program. They're looking at some of them we're looking at probably going to the Department of Corrections or some sort of intensive probation. So then that kind of catches some people on the higher end of who would be eligible for this. The people in the middle, I think, are the people that could kind of go either way. It's someone that I don't believe they would previously have gotten diversion, I believe they probably would have been a probation person. So I think what we're doing here is it's someone that most likely would have been supervised anyway. They probably would have gotten probation. However, this is an option for them to not go directly to probation. It's an option for them to potentially work their way through this without an actual conviction. And though they would still be supervised in this program, they would not have a conviction, and they would not go directly to probation. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take a more progressive approach to who we're placing on diversion. So ideally, the people that would be in this program are people who would have been on probation in the first place. Because in looking at this, and I noted that 3 people were directly placed in this program. We've got a couple more that are kind of in the process and are under consideration. I could have come here today and said we had 50 people in the program because, quite frankly, with the amount of diversion applications we've had, we could have just funneled them all to this program. But we thought that would have been a disingenuous thing to do. We're finding that maybe people that we thought in the past would have needed to be supervised don't necessarily need to be supervised, or supervision is not their first stop. And so this is kind of an extension, and it gives people who were borderline decisions maybe in the past on diversion, don't know if they're really going to be successful. This is kind of one more step in the process that hopefully the people can avoid ever going to probation.
Right, thank you. I just know sometimes when you add a enhanced diversion, it kind of maybe lowers the bar for your diversion, and then people who would normally not end up on any type of supervision kind of start funneling into that diversion piece, and you just add another layer and ultimately end up with more people on supervision in the long run. So I just a peace of mind to keep an eye on that, I guess.
Oh no, I think those are all good points, and that was something that we really didn't want to do. Is we don't want to just start roping in people that would not necessarily ever be in this situation. We're trying to identify as people that are already in a difficult situation to begin with. And another thing I'll note about the program is sometimes when I've been getting these diversion applications, what I've been doing is then contacting, if based on the circumstances it looks appropriate, and I'm not clinically trained, I'm just basing it on my opinion on what I've seen, I'll contact the attorney for whoever's applied, and I'll say, look, I'm not saying no to diversion, but I'm saying you may want to consider referring your client to drug court, or you may want to consider behavioral health court. And then sometimes it's gone the other way. There's someone who's on enhanced diversion right now that initially was considered for behavioral health court, and the behavioral health court team determined that, this person doesn't really meet the criteria of what we're looking for. And so I said, well, we can consider them for enhanced diversion. I don't think their diversion is going to be the place for them to be successful. I think it would have to be enhanced diversion. And so people can come through these programs in different ways. We just try to keep an open mind. And this is going to have a significant and substantial impact on someone's life, whichever path they wind up choosing. And so we want to do whatever we can to get it right on the front end, noting that there's still going to be available some fluidity. For instance, say that somebody is having a hard time, they've gone to diversion, they've gone to enhanced diversion, and it turns out some things present themselves because we only have so much information when we get them in initially. We would then be able to refer them, if they're willing and they want to do this, we would potentially refer them to behavioral health court or to drug court if it turns out they had some issues that were more pronounced that didn't quite present themselves earlier on. So really what we want to do is, I think it's all about getting people into the right places that are the best fit for them. So while we have these guidelines and these things in place, we do notice that it's a fluid situation, and we recognize the importance of getting people where they need to go, hopefully sooner rather than later, so they can move on with their lives. But I think that's all that I had. I don't know if anyone has any, if Ms. Young had any more thing that she would like to add, or if anyone had any more questions, but that was, I feel like I've been talking you off here. Oh, DA Valdez, you have a question.
Well, I wanted just to, kind of emphasize that this is a tool in our toolbox of alternative programs that we're really trying to focus on and really take a holistic approach to everyone who comes to the criminal justice system. And so it is very fluid, but it's a tool that's used and can be used, one that can be changed, one that can be, depending on, what we face when we come out of COVID. I mean, things may change a bit. We're not sure how that's going to turn out, but it's all part and parcel of the alternative programs that we're trying to do to keep people, hold people accountable. But at the same time, we don't want people to be in jail or under supervision if that's not necessary. And I just think this is a great tool that we're very conscious in how we use all of our tools, but one of many tools that are there for us to use if and when it becomes necessary with each individual that comes through.
And one more thing I would note about this program is that it's like our other programs, it's very malleable. And so if we might be back here in June or July, and I might be talking about this again, and I might tell you, well, in looking at how this program's been working, here's how we've chose to pivot it to better meet the needs of the community and then the people that we're trying to serve here. So it's something where that's something that I like about it, is that we got it rolling fairly quickly because Criminal Justice Services, Adult Services has been great about really just doing the heavy lifting on this and being ready to get things going so that we can immediately start serving people, and then we can find better ways and we can pivot as we need to as we move forward. So that's something that I think is really important to keep in mind.
If there are no other questions, Mike, do we have enough time for the third agenda item, or do we want to table that till next meeting on the bond data?
Yeah, I think we'll table that to May. So we'll allow people to absorb a lot of this information, do some follow-up discussion in May, along with a presentation by Dr. Cravens of the bond data.
Do you want to go ahead and talk about the community listening sessions?
Yeah, I think Sheriff Armbrister had one more piece that he wanted to talk about the dashboards real quick, so I'll let him do that, and then I'll talk about the community listening session.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I didn't get a chance to kind of have the closing remarks on the dashboard. I just wanted to point out also that this is not, I've been asked several times to give updates on the Vera study as well as our just population in the jail. So quickly, this is not to supplant or be in lieu of the Vera study. We're still very much committed to doing that. In fact, we have a meeting on Monday, the 19th, I believe, with Ms. Minion, who I think is on the call. So we're working through that. This is just another tool, as DA Valdez said, in the toolbox. Also, we too are just now getting these numbers from these dashboards and looking at them. So we're trying to identify, I don't want to call them anomalies, but if like you all had these great ideas about breaking out what other might mean or why there's no information here, and have those answers ready for when the public comes with those questions. So let us know anything that you see or have a question about. Don't hesitate to reach out. But what I do hope, and I hope that everybody can see, is that we just want to create something that's sustainable and transparent. And our data within the correctional facility is clearly very, very useful for us to identify any maybe needs or potential problems. We just want to make sure that the information that we are putting out is A, able to be put out, but B, accurate. So we're working very hard to make sure that we put out the right numbers so we can do the right work. So that was all I had. I wanted to just give an update. Plus, our jail population, like today, I know it's 112. And that is very low, and we dipped actually below 100 for a couple of days. We were at 99, 98, which is very substantial. We are seeing an uptick, and just my personal opinion, reading emails and updates, we're seeing a rise in some severe criminal activity. But that may just be a blip on the radar. That may just be the time of year. Things are getting nice. People are getting out and about. But the numbers are going to be there for when the people are ready to look at them. So I just wanted to just kind of throw that in there. So thank you very much for all the input today.
Thanks, Sheriff. So in response to some of our conversation last month around improving communication with the community and some follow-up conversations with Administrator Polinsky and Commissioner Patillo and Director Wagen, it dawned on me, I've been paying attention to a couple of the criminal justice coordinating councils around the country. And Charlotte, North Carolina has been this last year doing what they call community listening sessions. And the idea is that it's a community held meeting. So it's at a time available where community members can attend evenings or weekends. And we do a very brief presentation on a topic that the CJCC is working on. And then we're just there and present to listen and absorb what people say and what's important to them. And so with your permission, or maybe I'm asking forgiveness for taking liberty of assuming your permission, we're going to schedule one for April 27th to talk about the mobile access team, the follow-up of the presentation from February, and the work group chairs, Stacy and Monica have volunteered to do that along with Bert Nash. And so that's going to be April 27th from 6 to 7 on Zoom. We're going to start publicizing that. So you'll be getting an email about that. CJCC members are certainly welcome, but certainly if this is one of your areas of your agency, it would be great to have you there. I'm not really sure exactly how these will work, so I'm very interested to do this as an experiment and see if this is a better way for us to connect the community. I will say this: I'm committed to summarizing the statements of the community and bringing those back to the CJCC for your absorption. So, we're going to give that a try and more information to come. The plan is then, if we like this, to use other topics in the future. And some of you will be volunteering to talk about your agency or your work of expertise in the system.
Mike, this is Sarah. I guess I might try to be a little more, a little stronger in the encouragement. I think it is important. I think what we heard last month was that it is important for the CJCC to be engaged in this listening. So far more than just you're welcome to attend, I think it's important that we as members of this body do attend, that we do listen, and that we are present. So I'm gonna perhaps just be a little bit more forceful than Mike on that. I would like to know who can attend that session, and so that we can count on CJCC members to be there and be a part of this effort in our community. So I don't know if, I mean, I know we're running out of time today, but if you could let Mike know whether or not you can attend that session and be a part of that listening, I think that's important. I think that's part of our responsibility to the community.
Mike, will you
Did I hear that time again? Oh,
can you send out a calendar invite? And that'd be an easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Perfect, Patrick. Darren, it's going to be April 27th. That is a Tuesday. There is no city commission meeting that night from 6 to 7 p.m. And I will send out a calendar invite to council members. And you can respond if you're available, put attend on there. If you're tentative, put tentative, and that'll be an easy way to follow up with Sarah, who's going to be asking me. So.
Hey, Mike, another thought is in terms of outreach, I'd really make a outreach effort to NAMI Douglas County for that conversation. And I would also suggest that we reach out to the members of the Community Health Plan Steering Committee through Public Health in terms of making sure that we really are activating those networks of stakeholder interests in an intentional way.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone else that has suggestions, email those to me. I'll be glad to make sure that invitation is sent. So if you don't mind, if we move on to public comment, I know we're at 12:31, but Kristen Kuhn has had her hand raised, and so I want to give her opportunity. Let me see, Kristen, if I can. You should be able to talk, Kristen.
You need to move her into the panel.
Do I need to move? Okay, sorry. Okay, Kristen should be coming across. Kristen, can you talk now? You should be able to unmute yourself. All right, well, Kristen's working on that. Rick Kagan has joined us. He had a question as well. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, maybe Kirsten and I are kind of going down the same road, but both working with Justice Matters, and appreciate all the update on the dashboard. I think it's tremendous to see the transparency and data sharing that's underway. Just 3 questions, maybe they'll get addressed today or pushed off until the next meeting. Be great to see bond amounts included in the data on the dashboard. Not sure if those were already there, and just wanted to make sure that the county might be taking up the Vera Institute's offer of lending their expertise in further developments of the dashboard and in data analysis. There's no cost to that, as far as we understand. And the final point would be to hear a report about any update in progress with Vera Institute in executing the memorandum of understanding. Thank you.
I'll take the bond amounts question, and I'll turn the rest over to Sheriff Armbrister. Dr. Cravens was actually going to give a presentation of bond amount data today that the Racial Disparities Work Group has been working on for several months, but we ran out of time, so we'll be doing that in May. Yes, Dr. Cravens has been working on a dashboard for that as well as the District Attorney's Office is working on a dashboard on their end. They're using a little different form of software, so we're waiting for some staff training. They're coming, folks. We're going to flood you with information as best we can. So, Sheriff.
Yeah, in case you missed it earlier, we are still committed to the Vera Institute. This is our dashboard is simply to supplement that, and we have a meeting with Vera on Monday the 19th. So I think you can rest at ease that we're working very hard to get that taken care of. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Kristen, would you like to ask a question?
Oh, no, that was my mistake. I accidentally bumped my phone. I apologize.
No worries. Pam, that's all the questions I see from community members.
All right, since there are no more questions, do we have anything else for the good of the order today? Seeing no hands raised, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. The next meeting will be on May 11th. And the next listening session is April 27th from 6 to 7 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for attending today.